But we try to involve the other international member of transformative education members. So please feel free, the other person from outside Indonesia, please feel free to join us if you are interested to do the writing, the paper writing. And it is the idea. So at the moment, we will start from Peter as a director of International Transformative Education Research Network. And also the next in the 16th of September, in the same time, I will try to contact Jack before the 16th of September and 16th of September and let you know, because the differences between UK and Indonesia and the other part of the world as well. If you would like to have a look his work, there is a website of the actionresearch.net. So there is the ideas of the living theories as well, and the other publication that he has been published. And for the Transformative Education Research Group, it has been established since 2019, and then we have the research, and then because four of us come from UNJ, UNESA, and UNIMED. So we also have the supervised student that conduct the research on transformative education research. And also we have then several publications, the conference, and also the meetings, and also the seminar series. So hopefully it will be continued throughout the time, especially throughout the writing coaching and when we reach the international conference. And it is four of us, and then it is initiated because three of us, myself, Neni, and Mangara, is the supervised students by Peter, and we developed that Indonesia, and Bu Susi Fitri joined us, and then we developed throughout the time for engaging the students and also the lecturers and the other educators that interested in transformative education. And it is growing up members and still under the 3 universities. So anyone would like to interested to join the membership, please let us know. And then hopefully it will be continue as well with the other collaboration and also the other works that we would like to engage in transformative education. And it is the idea. So next year, we will have the 4th International Conference on Transformative Educational Research and Sustainable Development. And it's usually the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd. It is conducted in Nepal. And then in Kathmandu University, that hosted by Professor Balchandra. And then at this time, it will be starting in Indonesia. That's why we really would like to have the engaging conference that really specific on the transformative education. That's why we conduct this seminar series and also the writing coaching to reach that ideas, the aims, the goals for the 4th international conference. But probably some of you not really would like to do the writing coaching and would like to get the ideas first, and then we try to give the seminar series that related to our research at the moment. And it is our meeting group. We usually have really friendly, engaging, and then different kind of environment that we have because we really close each other. And then if you see all the participants, mostly is Peter's supervised student. We usually meet every 2 years, and then that is the first one in Nepal, and then the second one also in Nepal, the third one as well. The third one is it's online, and then it is the fourth one will be hybrid of offline and also the online session. So we would like to do it next year in October in Indonesia. So the activities that I have been mentioned about the seminars is like this. The keynote speaker, we will select the speakers that have the experts to the related to transformative education. And at this time, we have the coaching time. The coaching will be after the submitted the abstract, and also we will select it based on the abstract. And throughout the coaching, it will be reached until the next year to get the good paper in transformative education. And not only us, we would like to have the help from the other ETAN member from the other countries. Peter will share the description of the the international transformative network. And then the paper writing that has been mentioned, and also the last one is the international conference. And if you see for the paper writing coaching, we really focus on the specific type of research methodology and also specific type of the way you are doing the writing. Because for us, it's reflective, and also the way you transform yourself is very important. So if you know the research paradigm throughout the interpretivism, criticalism, until postmodernism, you will see how it is combined as well as multi-paradigmatic research. And if we see it is as a methodology, we usually say it is qualitative research and also autoethnography, critical autoethnography. So Peter will be explain more on this kind of research. And then as I mentioned about the focus, it is reflecting, and also the it should be transformation process. So the theme, it is related to the way you do your reflective teaching. Not only as a teacher, probably it can be also as a learners, and you can be related on your religion, local wisdom, like the cultures, and also the professional identity in different type of your professional identity, and also the multicultural. And then both of us as the one who help you, we are not the expert in the ways of we understand all, but we learn each other. So I believe that all of you have your own story, all of you have your experience, and it can be the way we would like to improve our professional practice, and we would like to develop, engage, especially on the student agency, and then also the agency of ourselves as an educator. So it is the way that we really would like to specific at this time, like you say, we not focusing on like quantitative research and the experiments and so on. We would like to really focus on the way you understanding yourself and also your professional and personal identity. And next, it is the example of our publication, and it is a part of International Transformative Education Research Group. It is by Peter, Bal, and Lily. That the first one is research as transformative learning for sustainable sustainable futures, and the second one is transformative STEAM education for sustainable development. So if you see all the kids in the books, it is all of our kids, of the authors of the books. And then if you would like to buy the book, that is from the Braille Sense. You can search the title, and also it is the book chapter that we have it, like the example for example, Pangara mentioned about the transformative soul of ethical responsibility that in this book, and also Neni has been mentioned about transformative knowing Indonesia in Islam, in Islamic context, and also I think myself in the other returning home in this book chapter. So I explain about how the challenge going back to UNJ and become a lecturer and also the researcher facing the challenge of different types of hegemony in the university. And for the second book, Neni and myself also writing a chapter. Myself is writing an ethical teaching model. And Neni also writing on the autoethnography study of the dance teacher. So it is the way of transformative education research. So Melanie, the other writing, Melanie, John, and then the other related to the transformative education. And then it is the example of writing by Pak Mangara from Universitas Negeri Medan. Is mentioned also the ethical, it is a part of this PhD dissertation as well, how the ethical is a part of the transformative learning. So if you see the way we are doing our writing, like I very much like to read the stories. It is a part of the example that we have been writing throughout our PhD dissertation and also the international publication. If in Indonesia, we always mention about the Scopus, level Q, and so on. It is Q1 and Scopus index. So it is quite tense in the way of the quality of the publication. And it is my publication. It's also, if you see the poems and also the stories inside the publication, it's also a part of our research topics, and also research in the way of like multi-paradigmatic research. It is a critical autoethnography. So the title is Moment of Critical Realization and Appreciation, a Transformative Chemistry Teacher Reflects. So it is only the story of myself as a data in the research. And you see, it is in the theme of the conference, it is a part of reflective teaching. And the next one is also about the culture identity. It is the next title that I write on the culture studies of the science education. The fish becomes aware of the water in which it swims. It is the way I understand how the culture of my father in Java, and then also my mother from Bima, that's influenced the way I teach. So because I teach chemistry, so I also explain about the way teaching chemistry that influenced by the culture identity of the teachers. So you have your own story, you have your experience, then, and sometimes we thought that it will be useless, but if you write in the way of transformative education is engaging in the way of transforming yourself, you can feel that it is the way of changing personal as well. So it is the last one. I in Universitas Negeri Jakarta working with laboratory school in the UNJ. We are working on learning for empathy. It is funding by UNESCO for 2 years, and we have do the it is related to value-based learning for empathy. It is integrating dilemma teaching pedagogy, and for the 10 subject in Indonesia. So you can have a look in the UNESCO website and have a look how it is conducted in Indonesia context. It is in the two language, Indonesia and English. So I think that's all the introduction for me. Terima kasih, and then I will give the stage to Alin to continue the session. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Yuli, for the introduction. And we will proceed to our core agenda, which is the sharing session for our wonderful speaker, Professor Peter Charles Tyler, about the transformative education research, especially for the autoethnography. Peter Charles Tyler is a young professor of the transformative education at Murdoch University, Australia. His vision for education integrates the arts and science to develop higher order capabilities such as creativity, critical self-reflection, ethical astuteness, and connectedness, which are essential attributes for living and working sustainably in the complex, diverse, and contested world of the 21st century. Peter coordinates the International Transformative Educational Research Network, or ITER, which promotes the transformative professional development for the teachers and the students in the universities and schools worldwide. And for all the participants, if you have any inquiries or questions to our speaker throughout his presentation, please do not hesitate to type it on the chat box. And don't forget to write down your name and institution, because we will have the discussion right away after the session. So without linger any longer, please help me welcome Professor Peter Charles Tyler, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Alin, for that lovely introduction. I feel most honored by that. And also to Yuli for your really excellent contextualization of why we're here today and what we hope to achieve. I'm really excited to be part of the Transformative Education Research Group in Indonesia. As Yuli was saying, we have a sister or brother group in Nepal, and that's been established for quite some time. So this is the turn of TERG Indonesia to launch itself globally. And I think we're doing that very well today, Yuli and Neni and Mangara and Susie, with people here from various countries, some of whom we know from Pakistan and from Philippines, and many we don't. You're newcomers. So hopefully by the end of today's presentation, if you are a newcomer, we hope that you'll be switched on to the ideas and values that we're promoting in teaching and learning and educational research, and the way in which all of that fits together. So Yuli, Alin, you're chairing this. Alin, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so is that clear to everybody?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So let me get on to the first slide. This is the flyer for the workshop and paper writing coaching session. And you can see there that my good colleague, Professor Jack Whitehead, will be your next speaker next time. I've known Jack since I did my master's degree at Bath University in, let's say 1981. So we've had a long-term relationship, and there's a lot we have in common in our view of the world, and in particular in our understanding and aspirations for the role of education in making the world a better place. So as I read through that flyer, I identified three major key concepts, and I've written them down up the top there for you. There's the concept of sustainable development, there's the concept of transformative learning, and there's the concept of the critical autoethnography genre. And by genre, it's a nice French word. It simply means writing style or style of writing. And that's going to be really the focus of what I talk about today. So putting all those key concepts together, we have a strong sense of shared purpose here, which is to engage in critical autoethnographic research for the purpose of developing transformative learning capabilities for promoting sustainable development. Now, we can look at that as developing in ourselves if we've never had any experience of this field before. This is an opportunity for novices, for people who are interested in with no experience, to engage as learners, as transformative learners in this process. If you are an expert, that's great. We're going to enjoy listening to your experiences and learning from them. As Yuli was saying, there are two books that I'm going to draw on today. What I've assumed is for all today's participants that you know nothing. Now, I hope that's not insulting, but I think it's safe for me to assume that I can start from the very beginning of all of this. And rather than taking a high-powered theoretical perspective, I'm going to take a much more practical approach. So there'll be a limit to the amount of theorizing that I talk about. I'll pack a little bit of that in to the end. Nevertheless, everything that I say today and much, much more you can find in this book, which was published in 2019. And we have some wonderful contributors, particularly from Indonesia, but also from many other countries as well. And as Yuli said, the authors of the chapters, those are their children on the front cover. So why that's there, it's a visual reminder that for sustainable futures is about these children's futures and their children into the future. So we have this long-term intergenerational view of the importance of education in creating opportunities and capabilities for our students and our children to engage in practical transformative development activities in their local communities, and even much broader than that in their workplaces. And the second book, which came out really last year, although with some publishing difficulties, it's really hit the streets this year. And again, whereas the first book is about how do you engage in research as a transformative learner, this one is more about, okay, if you've done that and you go back into your classroom, whether it be primary, secondary, or university or postgrad, as a teacher, these are the sorts of things that you can engage your students in. So it's very practically oriented with a little bit of theory at the front end. So again, I'm going to draw on both of these books. And what I don't say today, because of the time constraints, you can certainly see the elaborations of what I'm talking about in these two books. So there we go. So today's workshop, there's three parts to it: sustainable development, transformative learning, and critical autoethnographic genre. So let's start with the first one, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we've entered this new era called the Anthropocene, and scientists are arguing about when did it actually start. Some say it started back when we developed steam engines hundreds of years ago and started burning coal and wood for fuel, and therefore putting a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Others are saying, well, no, it's when the nuclear explosions and detonations took place in the 20th century. And this argument is about what can we see in the ground that is a reminder that things are different now to what they used to be. So there's a lot of geologists digging into the ground all over the world, looking for the new layers that are being impacted by our lifestyles over the last couple of centuries, where we have begun to have this huge global impact on the planet. And that's what that visual metaphor on the left says, is indicating. And a little quote from this publication: the human footprint on the global environment has now become so large and active that it rivals some of the great forces of nature in its impact on the functioning of the Earth system. We are so powerful now that we can actually alter the natural systems of the planet for better or for worse. And in many respects, we're doing it for worse. And there's just a few more visual metaphors just to remind us of the type of impact that we are having. So this has led to a number of global sustainability crises, and I'm sure everybody here today is aware of most, if not all of them. The one that is the most publicly discussed is climate change as a result of all of the carbon dioxide and monoxide and methane, et cetera, that we're injecting into the Earth's atmosphere and altering the weather systems. And you only have to look at today's news to see rampant wildfires in various countries. Look, Hawaii is the latest. Europe was last week. America was the week before that. Australia was last summer. It's huge. The impact is just massive. The other massive impact that we're having as a result of our modern lifestyles and the ability to produce plastics for so many different purposes. And by the way, when I was a kid, I lived in an era before plastics were invented. It's not that long ago. So we are now using plastics for so many different purposes. One of the big problems, of course, is the disposal of those plastics. Where do they go when we're finished with using them? So I'm going to actually focus on that today as the main issue. Another massive problem we have is the loss of biodiversity. Why is that? Well, we're cutting down our forests for agriculture and for logging. And as we cut down these forests in places such as the Amazon, such as Australia, such as Indonesia, such as the Philippines, and so on, we are reducing the amount of forest in the country, on the planet. And of course, where do you think we get our oxygen from? So not just our own survival, but also the survival of all the diverse species that use those systems of forestry systems as ecosystems. And the other one I would mention here is the lack of the loss of cultural diversity as we generate this modern lifestyle where people move from rural areas into the metropolitan cities and lose touch with their sustainability roots, as we were discussing a few minutes ago about Indigenous people and their connection with traditional wisdom systems and knowledge systems. So these are just some of the big ones. The latest one exploding into our consciousness is the global problem of artificial intelligence, which has certainly some great positives about it. We're all using it already, if we don't know that we are, by using Google and all sorts of other things. But there is a lot of concern now being spread worldwide about the dangers of weaponizing artificial intelligence. But I won't talk about that today. That's for next time. But I just wanted to sort of put before you the fact that we're living in a new era, the Anthropocene, and that we've got this big issue about impacting the Earth's environment in ways that are quite detrimental. One little example about plastic pollution. The World Economic Forum report says that each year at least 8 million tonnes of plastics leak into the ocean. And that's equivalent to dumping the contents of that truck, that garbage truck, into the ocean. What do you reckon? Every month, week? No, every minute. So just imagine that all around the world on average, that's the amount of plastic that goes into rivers, that flows down and goes into the ocean. So the ocean is expected to contain a huge amount of plastics in the very near future. And it's estimated that there'll be more plastics by weight than actual fish. Here's just a little example of some of the impact on the wildlife. And of course, we're now seeing that we, humanity, we are consuming our micro and nanoplastics in our food chains and in the air that we breathe. So this is another big problem that we're going to be confronting at the moment and into the future. I kind of like cartoons. Sometimes they make you laugh and sometimes they make you cry. This one serves both of those purposes. The seabirds finding that their food chains are depleted and they're having problems reproducing and raising their young. So, having said all that, very briefly, here we are at the peak of our human development. You know, we've spent many hundreds and thousands of years of developing as the major life on Earth, but are we simply an apex predator? And we are predating on our own biosphere. So that's a question that I put to you in a provocative way. Whilst we celebrate our so-called intelligence, at the same time, we demonstrate a huge lack of intelligence, particularly ethical intelligence. Now, I'm going to move from all that little theorizing stuff to something very practical here. Dr. Piang Manilam is a chemistry teacher in the laboratory school in the city of Konkan in northeast Thailand, and that's a picture of her school there. Thailand, as you would appreciate, is very much a strongly Buddhist society. Piang, as her friends call her, undertook a PhD research study a few years ago and finished about 2 years ago, I think it is now. That's her supervisor, Dr. Chokchai Yuanyong. And a little bit about Piang here. Her professional discipline is chemistry education, as it is with Yuli. Now, Piang values sustainable development. She's a very, very strong commitment to it. Sustainable development of both the natural environment and Thai culture. Her PhD thesis focused on developing students' chemistry knowledge and skills and transformative learning capabilities for sustainable development. And I'll unpack transformative learning capabilities in a few slides' time. What she did, if you might call it action research, she actually studied her own teaching practice with a group of her students and looked to engage them in learning about chemistry whilst at the same time developing their learning capabilities for transformation. These two images will become obvious to you in a moment as I start to read out some of her writing. So what she did in her PhD, she used the genre or writing style of critical autoethnographic writing. And I'm going to give you an example of how she did that to explain the research problem that she pursued in her studies. And this comes from chapter 15 of our book up there in the top right corner, pages 278 to 279. Now, before I share that with you, what I'd like you to do, and here's the workshop question. Now, remember, this is a workshop, which means that you have to do some work as well as me. So there's a question that I'm going to put to you. What are the characteristics of this example, of this writing style that is critical autoethnographic writing? So as I read out, I want you to be thinking about that. And here's a hint to how you might go about thinking about it. What I read out from Piang's writing, how does it differ from objective scientific writing, which has been, for most of the 20th century, the dominant style of writing in educational research, but which we have broken away from to elaborate into new styles. So when you're thinking about this, and it's going to be really quick, I'd like to actually spend an hour and a half on this question with you, and we could interrogate her text, but we don't have that time. So I'll read through it once. As you're reading it, I'd like you to use the chat box to write your impressions. So please write your impressions, either positive or negative. Both are okay, because we can discuss those in the chat box, okay? So think about this. If this is totally new to you, what is it that's new to you? What are the characteristics of this writing style that are quite different from a scientific style of writing? And remember, you can be favorable or unfavorable, both are okay. So here we go with section 4 of her chapter, and the section is called Socially Responsible Science Education. What she's doing here is developing her research problem. So she starts off with a poem. November full moon, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today. Shine, loy kraton, and water's high in the local river, and the clong, loy kraton, loy kraton. Loy kraton is here and everyone's full of cheer. We're together at the clong, each one with their kraton. As we push away, we pray we would see a better day. So there's a little reference there to that. So a few key concepts in there are the loy kraton and the clong. So let's see what she says next. This is now Piang's own voice in her writing. At the end of the year, it is winter in Thailand. I'm talking to my students in the grade 3 science classroom about the Loy Krathong festival to be held in a week's time. I ask students to think about the scene of the previous festival. All students know the Loy Krathong festival and can sing the festival song. I discuss the aims of the festival, which has a very long history. Now remember, this is a chemistry classroom, okay? Loy Krathong is viewed as floating the bad things of people's lives away on the river and respecting nature, especially the river that maintains people's lives. Southeast Asian people perceive that life depends on the use of the water and the soil. People hold ceremonies and festivals to respect the river that helps them to be alive in a year's time. And just before I go into the next paragraph, remember the question that I put to you, your workshop activity. What are the characteristics here? What's different from traditional scientific research writing? Put your impressions in the chat box. The Loy Krathong Festival is also organised to ask the river for forgiveness for people who may do bad things to the river, for example, walking, wading, excreting, dumping rubbish. In the Loy Krathong Festival, floating banana trees, leaves and bamboo trees, that is the krathong, okay, the things that they float in the river, they're used to represent the floating away of the bad things of people's lives. The festival is normally organised on the day of the full moon of the 11th or 12th month of the lunar calendar. I further discussed with my students the evolution of the krathong, the festival. We agree that nowadays we not only float trees and leaves, but also, guess what? Expandable polystyrene, plastics, paper, bread, and other materials that pollute the rivers. Even though the krathong is intended to respect the rivers are polluted every year. So there's an ethical dilemma, if you like. The polystyrene container is a popular krathong for many people who participate in the festival. We're bringing our modern technologies into the cultural festival. We therefore produce a huge amount of krathong garbage when we attempt to respect the river. This can destroy the food web. Then I asked my students, should the festival be organised again this year and next year? My students reflect on this question as follows. The first student says, well, I participate in the festival in my village every year, but I never float the krathong. I don't know why I need to float the krathong. Floating more krathong makes more garbage. I don't like the style of Loy Krathong Festival. So there's a critical voice. The other student, I think the world is changing. We should adapt to fit to the world. We choose constructing new beliefs as correct one. We perhaps do not organise the Loy Krathong Festival. So he's saying, I think maybe we should stop doing this. Student number 3, I will not float the krathong, miss. I never do it for a long time. Anytime we float the krathong, we put more garbage into the rivers. Another critical voice. Student 4, I think the Loy Krathong Festival has been organised for a long time. It just was organised one time each year. We should conserve the tradition. There's a voice that's wanting to continue the cultural practice. 5, the Loy Krathong Festival was created from the beliefs about respect of water. If we are happy to do this festival, we should keep doing it. Another positive cultural supporter. And number 6, I think we should conserve this tradition because it has been organised by our ancestors. So you can see that the students have mixed, there's a mixture of opinions amongst the class. So Piang says in her writing, I probed my students further about how to find solutions to the conflict between the garbage problem and the cultural beliefs in the Loy Krathong festival. But most are reluctant to respond. So the dilemma causes a sense of this classroom becoming gloomy and doubtful. Eventually, most of the students change their minds in support of holding the festival. They explain that it is organised only once a year and is an important cultural tradition. Regarding pollution and the environment, the students argue that we can find solutions later. Now, reflecting on this discussion, Yang says, I learned that students tried initially to respond to the issue of pollution by referring to their scientific knowledge. But then they demonstrated an overriding awareness of and responsibility towards their society. Excuse me. This experience reinforced my belief that I should enable my students to develop not only scientific concepts and skills, but also their awareness of contemporary social values, ethics, and morals in order to enact social responsibility to both society and the environment. Okay, so two things are happening here. Students' responses to our discussion prompted me to enact transformative learning theory. I felt that transformative learning would be an important tool for the humanizing educare of my students. That's a concept that has been translated from Thai. I had experienced transformative learning firsthand when I reviewed literature, visited Australian schools, and participated in transformative education conferences and seminars. Through these activities, I learned to use ethical dilemma story pedagogy for enacting transformative learning. Okay, so that's the end of this piece of writing that I wanted to share with you. There's a huge amount in there that we don't really have time to unpack today, but you can read about it in more depth in the second of our two books, particularly this thing called ethical dilemma story pedagogy. Just briefly, you can see that there's an ethical dilemma here. The students want to continue the cultural thing, but there's also the problem of pollution. So the two things stand in tension with one another. Okay, so and now you can see what the relevance is of the two pictures. There's the lady floating the krathong in the river as part of the ceremony, and beneath that is the plastic pollutions that are evident in rivers such as the Mekong, which border Thailand. Now it's your turn. I'm going to have a look in the chat box, if I know how to do that, and to see what your impressions are of the characteristics of that piece of writing that I've just shared with you. So I think I have to initially jump out of this and go down here and
On the Zoom, click the Zoom. Do you want to see the chat box, isn't it?
I do. I want to see the chat box here.
Yeah, so it should be in the Zoom and
the fourth icon on your left side, Peter. Yeah, the fourth one on the left.
Oh, there, Zoom. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, good. Now, I had it before. I don't know where it's gone. Maybe, Yuli, what you could do is read out those entries in the chat box.
yeah, so Sisi mentioned it. The research contains personal story, and from Sana mentioned about it is impressive, and then she understand the concept clearly now from your example. And Rika mentioned about, I think this paper brought the ideas that the writer's point of view about the festival and that polluted the river. And then he mentioned about everybody has a story, and then you can share your personal story related to your personal practices through transformative research. And Buyana mentioned about it is amazing. It is found the meaning behind the scene and then try to understand the transformative research. And then some of the participants mentioned about hopefully they can write like that kind of writing. And Pamara mentioned he learned about the courage and honesty. It is necessary to reflect critically on our own practices. However, this reflection later will bring awareness and open possibility for transformation. And Mubroto mentioned the writing goes deeper beyond just discussing about knowledge. And then it cultivates awareness as well, and connecting the awareness, the knowledge, the context into the new understanding and the new way of learning. And Melanie mentioned it is building the self-connection to what's happening in the society. So it is great, the response. So everyone, you can write down your, when you read through the writing that Peter has been sharing from Peng writing. So you can put on the chat box as well. And the last one, Bukeli mentioned about both teacher and the student have the same context of the story and use it to bring their awareness and build the connection between their knowledge and their heart response of the story. So the self-reflection, the heart engaging, something like that, Peter, if you would like to have a look their response.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your contributions, and really very insightful and valuable contributions as well. And they resonate with my feelings and understandings about the importance of this genre of research writing. And it's not all that new, really. It's been around for decades and decades. Just it takes a while to permeate and to get into areas where there may be resistance. And I've experienced that in my teaching over the many decades when I introduce in a research methods class to science and maths educators. There sometimes is a sense of, wow, what's this all about? You know, we came here to do research. What's this stuff? Because their idea of research is very narrowly constrained by the scientific method. But when we move, when I give permission to students to go beyond that and to understand that there are other legitimate ways to do research and to write it up, then suddenly people realize that it's very empowering. Now, I'm not creating a false binary here between science and non-science. Both are okay. And we can't, we got to do both. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So I wrote down some of the characteristics that I think are important in this piece of writing. Now, this is just one example, okay? There are many, many, many more examples. Not everything that I would want to see is contained in what I've just read out, but there are some major characteristics that I think are very important, such as it's poetic. There's a little poem at the beginning. And, that sets an emotional scene, I think, doesn't it? I mean, poetry serves a purpose of engaging us emotionally in whatever we're thinking about and feeling about, our feelings. It's autobiographical, as you pointed out already. I do this, I do that, I did this, I talk to my students, I thought so-and-so and so-and-so. Very, very strong in Piang's writing, the sense of I. And of course, when I used to teach physics and I had my students write up their laboratory reports, there was no I at all. And that's not the way that scientific research genre works. In fact, you can get into big trouble if you say I in that traditional genre. Narrative voice, the voice of the storyteller. Piang is telling a story about her lived experiences as a teacher in a classroom with grade 3 students. There's also her voice about her values, which are to do with sustaining Thai culture and the natural environment. So telling a story, and it's a natural thing to do, really very natural thing to do for us to tell stories. And with this kind of research, it's legitimate and it's important and it can be very valuable. You'll notice multiple verb tenses. She speaks as though things are unfolding in the present moment as she's talking to her students. Now, she's not actually doing that while she's writing, but what she's doing is recalling what she was doing. She was having a conversation a little while ago, and she's brought that in and put it in the present tense. That makes it much more engaging for the reader, I think. There's this concept called pedagogical thoughtfulness, which is in the literature, and that is when you write, you don't just write for yourself, but you write for your reader, your audience, and you want to engage them in reflective thinking. So using present tense brings an immediacy to the sense of what's unfolding. As I said earlier, there's an emotional dimension to this. She talked about the classroom climate, you know, when she got to, after finishing talking to the students about whether they should or should not continue with the Loy Krathong Festival. She said it was a very, as she tried to get them to sort of find a reconciliation between these two conflicting modalities, she found the students kind of got a little bit depressed and gloomy. And that's an important learning. You know, how do we engage our students in critical thinking without making them feel depressed about the problems in the world around us? And finally, it's reflective. It shows that Piang was engaging in reflective thinking. And as I said a moment ago, hopefully her reader will also find themselves motivated to engage in reflective thinking as well. So, of course, there are dangers to this type of writing in research. Not everything is, heavenly. There are some real problems that we need to avoid. Now, I won't go into these in any great depth right now. That's for another time. But obviously, self-indulgence. If you're a critic and you're sitting there thinking, I prefer scientific genre writing, third person, past tense, passive voice, you might be saying, I think this is very self-indulgent. So how do we avoid self-indulgence or narcissism, where the researcher wants to be a hero in changing things? And I've read a few theses like that, and that's one of my critiques of some of this type of action research, participant action research, where people go in there to make a difference in a school or a classroom, and they overlook the weaknesses of what they're doing, and they try and amplify their own importance. So we have to avoid that, the trap of narcissism. And the other one is solipsism, that is using your imagination and divorcing yourself from the actual social reality that you're embedded in and examining with others. So two big dangers that really do need to be avoided. And there are ways of doing that in this type of research. So rather than objective validity and reliability being the standards, we use other standards to regulate and judge the quality of this type of research. Okay, so that was the sustainable development with the critical autoethnographic genre exemplified there. I now want to talk to you very briefly about transformative learning that I mentioned a number of times. A model of transformative education, particularly for those who teach science and maths and technology and those related areas. Typically, we focus our students on the outer world, the world beyond the classroom, beyond the school, the world of natural systems and patterns and objects. What we tend to overlook is the students' inner worlds, particularly as they go up into higher education. We tend to stand up in front of them and lecture them as though their inner worlds don't exist. The whole constructivist movement, constructivist theory movement of the late 20th century made us aware that students bring a huge amount into the classroom with them, their experiences, their ethical values, their aesthetics, and so on. So what we want to do in the transformative education model is to, as teachers, look in both directions, have pedagogies and curricula that help our students to develop their understanding, skills, and values about the outer world, at the same time to develop as more fully human beings. So there's this objectivity plus subjectivity, and bringing those together, we're in pursuit of developing holistic knowledge, skills, and values. So that's just the broad sort of model that we're looking at here. We're not just focusing our students on the world outside. And as Piang has said, we're not just teaching them about the chemistry of polymers and plastics and so on, but we're teaching them about socially responsible citizenship at the same time as we're teaching the chemistry. Here's a brief visual literature review that supports transformative learning throughout the 20th century. These are some of the major scholars whose work, if you're interested in going down this pathway as a master's degree or PhD student, then you would need to be reading these people, particularly Jack Mesereau, who highlights the problem of disorienting dilemmas or ethical dilemmas, and Parker Palmer over there, who talks about, as a teacher, we tend to focus on what we teach and how we teach, but we also should be focusing on who is the self who teaches, and developing ourselves. And then others around here are so important as well. From that literature and from my experiences of teaching, what we've developed for the transformative education research groups in various countries, a set of 5 transformative learning capabilities. Excuse me, this cold is getting in the way of me talking. Now, I'll only unfortunately have to skip through this very quickly. We'll start with number 1, cultural self-knowing. What we want to do with ourselves and our students particularly is to help them in our teaching and in their learning experiences to get to know themselves, to be reflectively aware of the value systems that regulate their social interactions, their habits of mind. Just a brief little example, if you go to the shop and you come home with all your goods in plastic shopping bags, that's a sort of an automatic habit, isn't it? We've been doing that for many decades. But why? Why do we do that? Is that a good thing? So what does your culture say? As Piang has said, there's a culture clash between our impact on the environment on the one hand, and our cultural values and natural environment sustainability values on the other hand. So we need to raise students' cultural self-knowing. Secondly, relational knowing. This is about helping our students to connect or reconnect in many respects, particularly those who live in cities, with the natural environment, giving them opportunities. And what better place to do that than early childhood education, where children can be engaged in what's called nature-based play and forming relationships with each other at the same time. Number 3 down the bottom, critical social knowing, helping our students to understand what are the barriers to overcome the sustainable development issues and dilemmas. I think we have a few voices coming in from outside. So I'm helping our students. This in Australia, we have a subject in schools called Humanities and the Social Sciences, or HASS. Now, science teachers are actually collaborating with teachers of HASS to develop their curricula so that they bring this sense of critical social knowing into the learning of science students and math students. And you'll find examples of that, good examples of that, in our 2 books. Now, as Piang said, students can get rather gloomy, particularly if they're young, and all we do is point out what the problems in the world are. So we really need to lift them. And number 4 is this process of helping them to develop a vision based on ethical values of what a good world could be like, and more so what it should be like. So the should is an ethical commitment, helping them to develop a sense of it can be better, it should be better. And then number 5, practical agency. I know and I want to make a difference. I can change things. So those 5 capabilities are what we want to develop in our students, for transformative learning. In no particular order, they all interact with each other. I've just torn them apart to illustrate them separately here. So finally, let me just say a little bit about critical autoethnographic research. During the 20th century and into the early 21st century, we've seen in social science research and educational research in particular, the development and emergence of new paradigms for conducting research. And I've color-coded them here. The one that's most well known to most people in the science and technology and engineering areas is positivism. That's largely the paradigm of scientific method. And it was designed to explain law-like properties, and it drives research in the natural sciences. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, except it tends to sort of be used out of that context and into the social sciences. The next paradigm to emerge from anthropology is interpretivism, and that's used by cultural researchers to engage in ethnography, that is the study of other cultures. And we've also added to that the study of the self in relation to cultures. So that's what autoethnography is about, understanding the relationship between oneself and one's culture or cultures beyond ourselves. So that's the basis of autoethnography. Criticalism comes out of sociology and politics, and it really was derived in order to ensure that society can be a more fair and equitable place for everybody, more inclusive of culture and practices and religions and so on, something that we're still struggling to achieve, of course. So in educational research, we've got criticalism, which is about understanding the critical barriers to achieving our aspirations, and then also at the same time, not just pointing the finger outwards, but pointing the fingers back at ourselves and saying, you know, what's my culpability here in creating inequitable and unfair? And going back to Piang's example, you know, what do I do? What am I doing that's polluting the river? And should I continue to do that or not? So that's a critical, reflective question in this paradigm. Postmodernism is very exciting and hard to explain, but one of the things it does do is it brings the arts into educational research. So critical autoethnography can embrace postmodernism and bring the arts in, as Piang did at the beginning there with that poem. So poetry, drawings, animations, etc., allow us to express ourselves in much more diverse and enriched ways, and that can really help with the narrative voice. So the final paradigm, which is with us now, is called integralism. And the shape of that diagram might give you a hint as to what that means. It means it subsumes all the previous paradigms and allows all paradigms to be legitimate for particular purposes. And more so, we can combine those research methods in those paradigms if we know what we're doing and we have a really interesting research problem that we want to investigate. So I'm sorry it's so quick, but the book does explain all this in great detail. So we can take those four paradigms and put them in those four corners, and we can say that a big challenge, but also a hugely creative challenge for researchers, is now to be that visual paradigm in the middle. You can juggle between the different methods and paradigms and create a much more complex and creative approach to doing educational research. Okay, it's initially easy to fall off the bike, but when you learn to ride it properly, you can then juggle and ride the bike and do all sorts of wonderful things at the same time. So take those three paradigms, the interpretivist, the critical, and the postmodern, and bring them all together. And what we now have is critical, arts-based, autoethnographic inquiry. And I didn't just invent that. That's published very widely. There is a huge number of books that demonstrate how you engage in various forms of that: critical autoethnography, arts-based ethnography, etc., etc. So, you know, there's plenty more than just the two books that I've been involved in as a co-editor. So I'll just finish with this. The two books that I've been involved in as a co-editor with my wife, Dr. Elizabeth Taylor, and with Professor Balchandra, are available online from Brill, Netherlands. Now, chapter 1 in both books are free to download. So if you go to brill.com and you put the title of the books in, you can directly download the introductory chapters and a couple of other chapters as well. Okay, so thank you for listening to me and putting up with my bad head cold. And I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you about anything that I've said and anything that I've left out. So I'll hand back to Alin as our chair.
Right. Thank you so much, Peter, for the insightful sharing. So I will ask Professor Yuli to lead the question and answer session. Please, Professor.
Okay. Thank you, Alin. Peter, do you want to stop share?
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh yeah, that's all the little menu items I was looking for before.
I think because you using the extended screen, so even
Yeah.
myself, I found it is difficult to manage
It's
it.
another layer of complexity.
Yeah. Okay, so I ready. There is a several response, but the response I have been read, and there is several question as well. And everyone, please feel free to asking question directly to Peter. I just copied the question that on the chat box. So the first one is from Noberto Gomez. I think Noberto is from Timor Leste, isn't it? Noberto?
Yes, I'm from Timor-Leste.
Yeah. So he mentioned that, can you explain again, because I don't understand the global sustainability crisis, climate change,
Okay.
and the politic pollution.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, is that plastic pollution?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's relevant both ways.
Yeah, it can be the metaphor of the politic.
Hello there, Noberto Gomez. Thank you for your contribution. I can't see you, unfortunately, but let's. So you're in Timor-Leste, and what's your role there? What do you do?
Noberto.
Are you a teacher? Are you working in a university or a school? Okay, while he's thinking about how to reply, what your comment just highlights how the overwhelming global crises are not necessarily shared by everybody. Now, there are two groups. There's one group that says they don't exist, and the other group says, oh, I don't know much about them. Do they? Tell me more. And I think that's where Noberto is situated. The deniers, I don't want to talk to. But there's plenty of evidence, scientific evidence, for the global crisis of climate change. The panel on climate change, which is an international panel of climate scientists, have been measuring all sorts of things over a very, very long period of time, sea level temperature in particular. And what we've seen recently is that with the increase of global temperatures, we have a much higher average temperature across the globe than we did some decades ago. So what I would suggest you do is have a read of that climate, this, what's it called? The International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. They have many of their reports available for download on the internet, and they update them every 12 or 6 months. So there's a whole range of these that I've been following over a long period of time. Plastic pollution, you can look up sources for that. Just do a keyword search. The World Wildlife Fund is particularly concerned about the impact on seabirds and the food chain in the marine environment. There's plenty of evidence that I've seen, and I just marshaled a little bit of it today. So I would encourage you, if you're a teacher, you might want to encourage your students to do some research themselves, particularly if you're a biology teacher. You would set your students some homework. You know, next weekend, go out in the local community and have a look at, can you find any plastics? You know, where have you found them? And how much have you collected? Bring them to class and tell us a story about the prevalence of plastic waste in your local environment. And that begins a conversation that I think can be very valuable and can empower the students with this sense of agency that, you know, maybe they should be looking to help prevent that type of pollution. Okay, Yuli, I'll go on to the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Menyibukkan diri.
Okay. So the next question is, Sanasa mentioned about, my teachers told me I can't do autoethnography in query because I'm not a gold medalist. So please explain who can do an autoethnography research.
Well, there's a lot of hidden information there that I'd really like to understand. What's the lady's name again?
Sana. Yeah, you can ask directly Sana for the question.
Yeah, Sana, please explain what you mean by what you've just said, please.
We cannot hear your voice.
Okay, let me continue to answer the question anyway. If you were a master's or a doctoral student, it's likely, more likely than not, that the university that you're working in subscribes to the scientific method as a means of doing educational research. Why? Well, because that's the way in which your supervisors have got their doctorates, by observing the scientific method, using quantitative methods. And maybe they don't go to international conferences and learn that there are alternative methods, alternative paradigms. Maybe they haven't read or kept up to date with developments in educational research, social science research. There's been a huge amount, there's been an avalanche of developments in the last 30 or 40 years. Now, I don't know if that helps you to be aware of why you're restrained, but if you're not happy with that, maybe you should look at going somewhere else to do your studies. And there are some great universities around the world where you can do autoethnographic research, such as the universities that our conference organizers today work in. UNJ, UNISA, UNIMED, just to name three in Indonesia, also in Nepal, Kathmandu University. So maybe you need to advise your supervisors that possibilities exist elsewhere, and if they're into marketing, they might want to catch up.
Yes,
So that's an assumption I'm making, that you're a doctoral student.
Yeah, it's quite challenging, Peter, as a student, for example, and you would like to do the ways of your writing, and you have your supervisor and so on.
Yeah.
Actually, in the future, Sana, your supervisor or your lecturers in the university will accept the new ideas. For example, like myself and the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science, like in these different ways, like the other social science. So, and then we just started and then continue, even though only it's a small movement, but at least we're doing something differently in the way that we like the way of reflection and transformation. So that's the idea. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah. Can I just also say, Yuli, that
yes,
the purpose of this group, TERG Indonesia, is to help to spread the good word to universities across Indonesia and in the region of Southeast Asia, to help with this process of enlightening those who don't know much about the alternatives. And not just by telling, but by demonstrating. And all the publications that are coming out from the various universities where researchers' transformative learning is being practiced, both by academics and by graduates, are good evidence, compelling evidence that A, the journals exist you can publish in, and B, it's having a very important impact on people's lives.
Yeah, I think like the thing that we are doing right now, like coaching the other scholars, is also help us to learn again about the way. Sometimes because the way we are writing, we just doing it, but to transfer it to others is it is the way we learn to coach in these activities as well. So hopefully it works well until next year. So the next question is, so Sana pointed out in the chat box, yeah, the teachers only follow the traditional ways of research and they didn't accept the new ideas. And the next one is Bu Aryati. Aryati mentioned, how does the level of learning to put on the transforming in peers interest capabilities? Do you understand, Peter? Otherwise, I asking Bu Aryati to ask directly.
Yeah, it'd be helpful if we could have a more direct
Bu Aryati,
request.
Do you have, can you ask directly to Peter, because probably it needs more explanation on the question.
Okay. Actually, as a student, at least, for example, the experience of a student and teacher, of course, a different level. So to understand the student, to make a peers, sometimes I'm looking for how the transforming can help us as learners to follow the level of learning what really interested on the special subject. For example, as a sport, when you're showing the chemical example, you saw the writing and the pictures. So I exactly related what you're saying on the writing. I understand that, and then giving more stronger the power of the picture to clarify all the explanation. So that's what I really mean, because it's a little bit hard when the people doesn't have experience on the writing. That's the writing really maybe struggle. So how to strengthen the struggle to appears of the strength of the maybe the picture or the action with the moving and stuff like that, because I'm a sport background, so my activities are more action than writing. So but I'm really looking for the writing level to understand a little bit when the people are reading my experience learning. Thank you.
That's good question. I mean, multimedia is now available to us, all forms of artistic representation. And I'm reminded immediately of Nenny. Are you still with us, Nenny? Nenny Mariana, Dr. Nenny Mariana. Yeah, because the chapter in your book with Tricia is about a mathematics teacher who before she taught mathematics, she's a dancer. So she dances traditional Indonesian dance, and then she became a dance teacher. And then she started to become a math teacher. And what Nenny was able to do was to get her to bring the two together so that she was able to teach mathematics in the context of traditional Indonesian dance. Now, maybe Nenny, you'd like to say more about that.
Yeah, that's one example of contextual situation in transformative research that I've done with my students. So previously, she was my undergraduate students, came to me, asked me to supervise her undergraduate thesis. But at that time, she told me that she disliked mathematics, but she loved dance very much. But she wants to get supervising from me. And then I told her, why don't you teach mathematics through dance? And then at that time, the moment she just didn't have any idea about how to do that. But after that, I asked her to dance with teaching dance to her students. And then we observed the videos together, and then we learned each other from her dance and her instruction of teaching dance to the students. And after that, we developed some mathematical ideas through the teaching experience. So, and she wrote auto-ethnographically the experience while she had changed her mind about, mathematics is interesting. I can still teaching dance while I'm doing mathematics. And while I'm teaching dance, I can ask my students to do mathematics, something like that. So the transformative ideas of hers as a dance teacher bring her to a new world of, while you are doing dancing, then you can do scientific knowledge as well.
Thanks, Nenny. Yeah, and that's one of the chapters in our second book.
Yes.
Yeah. So probably Bu Ariati can contact Bu Nenny as well. It's like how Bu Nenny explained the way dancing is like sport, doing sport, and the narrative writing. How to express it in the ways of writing. So Bu Ariati is doctoral students in early childhood education.
Yeah, Ibu, we have done so many research in mathematics with sport as well, mathematics with what is it, pramuka, we call it, sports, yeah, and also many other things with cultures, Indonesian cultures.
Thank you so much, everybody who's helping. Maybe I'll try to start. Bu Yuli.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Ariati. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I will continue for the next.
I'm sorry, Professor Yuli, you are muted.
Yeah, so for the next questions, because asking about can you please elaborate more about the critical autoethnography writing dangers such as self-indulgence and what's it? And
Okay.
Yeah, solipsism in brief.
From
How can aware of these dangers while doing the research? So
Bikesh from Nepal.
yes.
Namaste, Bikesh. Nice to have your participation.
Nice to have you here.
Okay. Yeah, look, this is a big issue. It's about alternative standards for ensuring the quality of what we do. And as I mentioned earlier, when you move out of the scientific method, you're leaving behind, in a way, objectivity, usually measured statistically in terms of validity and reliability constructs, but also can be manifested in a qualitative sense as well by having third-person passive voice past tense in writing. Now, if you're going to do autoethnographic type research and you're looking at the relationship between yourself, perhaps as a teacher, and others, maybe they're your students or maybe they're your teaching colleagues, so you're trying to do ethnographic work and understand them as well as understanding yourself more deeply. It's very easy when the outcome of all this is a PhD thesis, which needs to be examined and passed. So what's our major focus here? Our own self-fulfillment or the context and the research problem that we're investigating? How do we ensure that our researching self is authentic and that our understanding of the others is authentic as well, not just in our imagination? Now, I mentioned the myth of the hero. Now, the hero goes back into Greek mythology. It's very easy to be a hero, particularly if you are calling yourself a hero. And what that tends to do is to blind yourself to what you're not good at. So in our haste to finish our PhD thesis and get it examined successfully, all we want to do is present positive evidence. So if that's all we're doing, we're kind of in the positivist paradigm, just presenting positive evidence. Okay, so how do we avoid doing that? Well, as a transformative learner, researchers transformative learning, we've got cultural self-knowing and critical self-knowing and critical social knowing, and they come together into what we call critical reflective thinking, to examine your own premises, your own values, and to interrogate them, and to ensure that you are not falling into the trap of being overly indulgent about your own point of view by ignoring or downplaying the mistakes that you make and the lack of understanding of the other. One of the really nice genres that I've come across in many years is John Van Menen's book called Tales of the Field. And one of he talks about realist writing, which is kind of the scientific genre, impressionistic writing, which is this is how do you feel about what's going on, and thirdly, confessional writing. So when you're writing your narrative of voice, you're talking about the process of doing the research, what is going well and what is not going well. You're confessing to not doing things perfectly. And that helps enormously to put on display the critical self-reflection. And that really does help to counter the myth of the researcher as hero. So critical self-reflection is a key here. And that's one of the attributes of transformative learning. I'd also say when you're trying to understand the other, whoever the other is, a colleague, a student, whatever, we have to engage them in a productive conversation that is of mutual benefit and mutual interest. We can't just go in there and forensically examine somebody and walk away with all the data and leaving them with nothing. It needs to be an authentic transaction. So how will they benefit from, this is an ethical issue, how do my participants benefit from me interacting with them? Now, I'll reflect back when I did my PhD many, many decades ago. I spent 2 years working in a classroom with a teacher. In the first year, he wanted to become a constructivist teacher, whatever that means. So I was in there interacting with him, giving him advice, giving him feedback. In the second year, I made what I now think is an ethical error. And that is, I went in to see what he was like in a year later without interacting with him. And boy, I reckon he must have felt really judged because he couldn't be perfect. He couldn't live up to my earlier expectations. Why not? Well, because of all the curriculum constraints and examination systems and so on. So I thought that was I really feel uncomfortable about having done that now. Anyway, going back to your question, yeah, critical self-reflection, really helpful to avoid narcissism. That is, I'm a hero here, and I'm only going to present positive evidence of my achievements in this study. Does that help you?
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, probably next time there is a specific seminar on the quality standard or something like that. Because
yeah, I was deciding whether or not to talk about those today formally, but I wanted to make it more.
Can I add
coaching.
something?
Yes,
yeah, please,
in my practice as well. While working in the education field of Nepal, so in the parts of integrated curriculum implementation, so most of the schools, they used to say that so we are implementing integrated curriculum. But while I entered in the school and discussed with the teachers, head teachers, and the head of the departments, so I found that so they are only talking about the integrated curriculum implementation, but in the reality, there is no more work. And I found that there need to be more work on the implementation part. And so I found there is a problem or a gap between the external connecting with the integrated curriculum implementation, and another part is the ground reality. So I got the answer. It means a productive conversation. So my another query is how can we do a productive conversation to the participants or research participants for getting a critical self-reflection?
Yeah,
it's really challenging in Indonesia context. Even if you ask your students, they just keep silent, and then it's quite challenging to say.
That's a cultural issue.
Yeah, it is the other cultures. Yeah.
It depends on how you establish the relationship initially with your participants, your co-participants, let's put it that way, and make the agenda very clear. I'm here to work with you to help you to improve your practice. And this is something that Jack Whitehead will say next week. I know you have living contradictions. On the one hand, you want to improve. On the other hand, there are reasons why you can't. So let's examine the relationship between those two things. Now, that your participants will then decide whether they want to be involved in the study with you or not. You can't force them to. But, I think laying out that set of possibilities is important initially. Because culturally, perhaps, and I've read many theses in Indonesia and in particularly in Nepal, where people are trying to do your type of research, go into a local school and help to improve things. The outcome is usually improvement went from aspiration to reality,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And why? What are the barriers, the critical social issues here to not having the full realization? And there are many, aren't there? I mean, there's the curriculum, there's politics, there's individual aspiration. That's a very complex thing to do. So you have to be really clear with yourself and with your participants as to what's the goal? What are we going to try to achieve here? How long have we got to do it? You can't have a massive change in one semester. Maybe it takes.
Otherwise, you will.
Maybe it's not just you. Maybe you need to be there with a team. And I know
Sure,
that's going
sure,
on at Kathmandu University. There are teams going out and working in local schools.
Yes, yes. So my supervisor is Balchandra Luite.
Ah, well,
And yes, he used to motivate me for doing a research on these parts as well. And I'm very happy to join this workshop and seminar. And it's very meaningful. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Yuli.
Nani
Thank you,
would
Baker.
like to add something, and then
Yeah,
good luck
it's
for your study.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to find because question about narcissism, because I found this as well while I'm supervise my student about this kind of research. Most of the time they, like exaggerating, show what they can do and what they achieve so far, and all those good things together in one story. And suddenly I think that one simple formula that usually I share to them is try to criticize yourself and your values and belief that so far you think that's right. And if at the end of the journey you found that the value is valuable to still hold, then you do that. But at the end of the journey, if you see that the values and the belief that you hold is not really appropriate for doing these things together, changing the world and make it a better world for us to live, then just don't hold it. And then I think that's a work enough with my students, because they try to not focus on attracting people to themselves as the author of the autoethnographic story, but trying to attract people to the same goals that we want to achieve within the educational system. So that's the point, I think, to avoid narcissism.
Yes, exactly. And also, I would like to add more one thing. Actually, in Kathmandu, we have, I belongs to the Newari culture and Newari community. And so there is a Ostamatrika dance. It's a spiritual, traditional dance. And last year, I took some information about this cultural dance and tried to connect with the mathematics. And I just hear from Nani that so you are doing a cultural or dance with mathematics. It is very fruitful for me as well. So can you please send me your paper? Then so I can add your ideas and review from your paper as well. And I'm trying to write a transformative education in the cultural dance with in the parts of mathematics as well. And in the master, I did cultural contextualizing with our Ratu Matsindranath chariot and the festival. So at the time, I try to reflect my experience, and I try to collect the narratives from the participants as well. My interest area of research is in the ethno-mathematics and cultural mathematics, exactly. So thank you for giving the opportunity to share something about my experience as well.
Yes, good luck for your research.
Good luck for your
I'll
study.
send you my email through the chat.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Bikas. Thank you, Nani, for. And then at the end, we will asking Pak Mangara and Bu Susi as well to put the statement on this kind of research as well. Okay. So Peter, we will have the last two questions on the chat. So the first, Nani will help as well. So it is about the didactical design research. It is my supervised students, Bu Broto, and then it is doing the research by didactical design research. So it's like, for example, like if you create the model, the learning model, it is come from the interpretivism paradigm. So when you create the model, you have to explore what happened in the classroom, and then once the learning model, for example, completed, you have to ask the students also what they respond on the model that you have been created. So they call it like didactical design research. So he mentioned that very similar with autoethnography method. If you're familiar with the model, but then he will also add into the information as well regarding the DDR, the didactical design research. So do you have any?
Well, I am familiar with design research.
Yeah.
There's a very 5-step process,
Yes.
and it originates from South Africa.
Yes.
And I've seen that put into practice. And I think maybe 1 or 2 of the chapters in our book, in our STEAM book, exemplify how that can be done. I've not heard about DDR. That's new to me. The only way I could judge whether that or anything else had an autoethnographic dimension to it is by looking at how it's being used, what is the purpose of its implementation, who's being auto and who's being ethno. Is this the teacher being the auto and the students being the ethno? And is there therefore an examination of that relationship by the teacher? So apart from that, I really can't say much more. Maybe Yuli can.
Yeah, Nanny will help me as well. So I think the ways of writing is quite different because it is not really autoethnography. Probably it's like case study, or if it is more into the culture of the ways in the classroom, but it's really depend on how deep the researcher point out the environment and also the culture in the classroom. But in the way they focusing on the solving the problems, not focusing on the self and others. So probably it's quite different way of research as well. So it is focusing more on the ways of interpretivism paradigms. Probably Nanny will add the other things as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Yuli. Beside interpretive paradigm, I think DDR or DR, I think they are the same terminologies, Peter, because DDR was developed by one Indonesian professor, I believe. And then we try to put it DR into the Indonesian context. Anyway, they have a similar methodology to use. So for DDR, beside interpretive paradigm, I think it's more like post-positivism. So in the way they put the quality standards in the research are different with autoethnographic. In the autoethnographic, we aware who we are, and then we aware who our participants are. And while we are doing interviews, we really are interchange our views. So while in DDR, you have set of activities that you design, and then you try out the activities to your students. And the way of interpretive to your students' response become the new activities to revise the first one, right? And then because of that, why you focus not on the ethnic or ethno of your students' beliefs and values, but you focus on the way they are thinking to the given activities.
Okay.
So it's more like cognitively, right? You also maybe a little bit focus on the social classroom norms, but you don't talk it on the way of the set of values and belief that you have to your students. You just look at the way how, for example, in my case, mathematical norms, social mathematical norms happening during the activities conducted. So I think that's quite different to the goals and also the quality standards. And one more thing to the writing genre, because if you are doing autoethnographic, Peter already explained about poetic, we can do poem, we can do storytelling, but that's not happen in DDR. You just narrate, not in a story way. You just, like doing qualitative data in words, but not in a poem, but not in a poetic. And that's quite different.
Yeah.
I think that's the additional things.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Bu Neni. And the last question is from Melanie, Peter.
Oh, yes, I've looked at that in the chat room.
Yes. Yeah, on the chat box. So it's the last question. It's I wrote a poem, What Understanding Mathematics. So today is for mathematics educators in this Zoom. What understanding mathematics is, the example is creative autoethnography writing. So it is autoethnography or not. The title is What Mathematical Understanding Is. From my own perspective is 12 stanzas. I wish some. Melanie, do you want to asking directly to Peter, and then probably Pak Mangara, are you still there? I would like to invite my colleagues as well, Pak Mangara as mathematics educator.
Good idea.
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, Melanie.
Hi, Yuli. Thank you so much. Yeah, I wrote already I had my poem. I wrote, I think, 2 years ago. I stopped writing. I got busy from my work here. And I wrote a poem on what mathematical understanding is, because I had taught for, I think, more than 2 decades already. I started teaching elementary. I had a time to teach secondary, and then tertiary, and now in the graduate school. So I can give the wrap up of what is really meant by understanding mathematics. So I put it into writing, and I wrote analysis, and I hope someone can read it and give comments.
Well, I'd love to read it, so please send it to me. I just a quick response to you, Melanie. Thank you for that. Autoethnography, it's not easily defined. We have this auto and we have this ethno. Now, the classic way of thinking about it is self in relation to others. But another way of understanding it is the culturally situated self. So the two collapse together. And I kind of look at it on a continuum, self here, others over there, and you position yourself accordingly, and it varies when you're doing your inquiry. You might be more self-oriented, you might be more other, but the other don't have to be necessarily people that you're interviewing. They can be the culture at large. How am I situated in relation to that culture at large, or cultures plural? So that's kind of the starting point. Now, if you write a poem, I guess the question is why? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve a deeper understanding for yourself of what you mean by mathematics? Or are you trying to understand what other people mean by mathematics? Or do you try to understand this thing called the culture of mathematics? So you have to be clear, I think, about what your purpose is in writing the poem. Did that make any sense at all, Melanie? Probably not.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I think because probably different ways of representing the data. Like Melanie, in quantitative, we representing by the numbers, and then the qualitative, like sometimes the quote of the interview, the observation, and so on. And the way of the transformative also put the poems, the conversation, and the ways of the reflection. So you already done the analysis, and then hopefully we can read through as well. And then Peter can give later on.
Yeah, I like to email. I love those.
Perhaps
Yeah,
Mangara can give one example of mathematical poem that he wrote.
Oh.
And then
I need to find it.
Mathematical poet.
Mathematics. And then probably I will add again one question from Bu Yuyun. Bu Yuyun, I will put on the spotlight. So he asked about the what is it? The emotion the emotion on the writing, because the characteristic is emotional dimension. Also, I think my colleagues here, Bu Susi, Pamangara, and Neni can explain about the Melanie question on the poems and also on the emotion as well. Yeah, please do. Peter, do you want to explain?
Yeah, I'm just wondering,
emotion?
is there a particular question or?
Yeah, it is the the question on the involvement of the emotion in
Yep.
critical autoethnography. How is it doing?
Yeah, it's not altogether clear what you're asking.
It is
how
the
it doing?
emotion, Peter. Neni,
Yeah.
hopefully you can explain the
Yeah.
emotion aspect. I am.
She asked about, can you explain more about how to involve emotion in the autoethnographic writing, Peter?
Okay, all right. Look at the opposite. Look at emotion-free writing, which is classically scientific method writing. You know, there is no I, there is no present tense, and there's no, what else is missing? I'm missing past tense, passive voice. So it's almost as though the writing writes itself. There is no author. That's in the extreme. Of course, there are softer versions of that. So there's no room for emotions because according to the myth of the scientific method, scientists don't feel anything. Now, I've got two brothers who are both scientists in the biological sciences, and I know they're very passionate and they do have a lot of feelings, and their emotions drive them in various ways to do particular types of research with particular types of people for particular purposes. It doesn't appear in their write-up, in their journals at all, but it's there all the time. It's motivating them to lead that lifestyle, to lead that professional lifestyle. What we're doing now here is simply making visible what already exists and being honest about what our influences are, and for ourselves, and secondly, for our reader. Now, if we want to engage our reader in reading about our research inquiries, the last thing we want to do is give them the scientific method writing, because I personally don't find it very engaging unless it's really about a topic that I'm passionate about. So I have to have feelings for a start to read it. So, you know, I think writing with our feelings helps us to uncover something about ourselves that's usually hidden from view. And if what we're trying to do is engage in to develop our transformative learning capabilities, it's not just a left brain cognitive activity, it's a whole being activity. You know, there's faith, there's feelings, there's values, there's prejudices, and there's a whole bunch of things. We are complex people. So the more we understand and display that complexity, the clearer it is about what we're trying to do and what we've achieved. Just earlier, talking to the guy from Nepal, you know, it helps us not to try and be narcissists as well. Narcissists, it's a dangerous path to find yourself going down. They're full of feelings, but they kind of mask them. I don't know if that helps answer the question. Maybe somebody else can do a better job.
Yeah. Amarang, please.
Okay. For me, writing is a complex activity since we want to represent something that is more abstract in our mind into something more concrete, such as words. And I am, as a mathematical lecturer, grows in some more rigid scientific and a mathematical way. So when I met Peter and he introduced me with autoethnographic, it's kind of a new word for me, in a better way, of course. So for me, writing autoethnographically or doing research autoethnographically is kind of connecting myself and the culture. But the point is, the focus is not the self. It's about the culture, but how we learn the culture through the self. And when we talk about the self, as what Peter just mentioned before, it's not about some part of me, but the whole me. If I may share one of my poem about bias, this is a poem that I wrote in my thesis. So please allow me to read it. Bias, subjectivity. I and my senses, I and my emotions, I and my feelings, I and myself. Are we different? Are we separated? Am I not being reduced without any of them? Altogether, define me as a person, a subject with its own subjectivity. Subjectivity that makes a person unique. Uniqueness that demands to take differences into account. My subjectivity allows me to be related closely to other subjects, while awareness of differences opens my eyes wider, bringing up completeness and complexity, allows me to see more and deeper. Am I being delusional when I can see something that others cannot? So here, this is a poem that I write since I am introduced with autoethnographic by Peter. So emotion is a strong aspect, actually, for us to understand the world, to understand as well ourselves as well. So when we are doing autoethnographic writing, we are not only learning something out of ourselves, learning about the culture, but also learning about ourselves. So it's just if Peter said conversation, it's just talking with the self and the others. So when we are writing, we are talking to ourselves and we are talking to the others. So this, I think, the key for me in writing autoethnographically. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Mangara. So, Bu
Very
Susi,
good.
actually, as a counselor, probably the aspect of emotion. You can add something regarding the writing autoethnography.
Okay.
Yeah, can I just say one little thing here?
Okay, yes, please.
To understand better what is autoethnography or autoethnographic inquiry, let me put it that way, it's important to read examples, good examples, and there's a whole range of them. If you sit down and theorize about it, you end up going around in circles, you know.
Complex.
And there's no firm foundation. In fact, that's one of the nice aspects about autoethnography, exploring the absence of a firm foundation. But practicality speaks much more convincingly to people than theory. And that's why today, for example, I put some strong practical examples in. So, and there are plenty of examples of autoethnographic writing. There's not one single best way to do this, not like positivism.
Yeah, agree. Please, Bu Susi.
Okay, thank you. Other than three of my colleagues who is very quantitative in environment, and they being adopted into the being adopted into the environment, which is very qualitative and very deep in emotion. And my stand is the other way. I mean, I work in an environment that is the framework itself is very personal and very emotional. But since our university is very much affected by quantitative, so in my department we have to be in very quantitative way to see the way we see ourselves. And I think this is my beginning. Try to get back this department into the right self. So to be honest, I don't have many research background on this area. Since I'm also the beginning of understanding these methods, while I am in the environment that is very much autoethnography actually. So, but today I want to share the ideas, maybe because this is very wide, and for me myself is very wide. I'm not sure autoethnography itself, it should be very very specific, right? Very specific, very focused. And to understand the idea, you should be deep. So I'm trying to share the possibility, the theme, the topics that might be we might be research about this. And for example, this is not my research. I just share. I just search what kind of research that we might do. And this is a very interesting book by Miller. And this book talk about the ethnography of a beginning teacher. And I think this is very important that we in Indonesia have so much story about the beginning teacher, but not much research on about what is the experience, the emotions, the barriers that the beginning teacher bring to their profession. For example, in my field, for example, counseling itself, it's very much upper class profession. I mean, the person who go to counselor, it should be in very middle upper class, because you have to pay. For example, you have to be really understand that something wrong with you, maybe psychologically, need a profession helper. So while the beginning teacher, while the counselor itself may be not coming from that class, for example, many of my students is from lower level social class, for example, how they deal with this kind of profession that is very difficult for them, very different from them from social class background. So we understand this kind of what happened to the beginning school counselor or beginning teacher when they're come into this teaching or school counselor profession. And the other thing that I think we need to people can research on this is for example, if you're not coming from the certain social class and you teach in this school that is very different with your social class, you will face the problem that looks like professional problem, but it may be coming from your social class background. For example, how you deal with high class students, how they spend their time, how they spend their money, for example, while you might have very different point of view of that. So this is a very personal experience need to be explored about the beginning teacher. So there is a lot of ideas about writing ethnography for beginning teacher. And the other thing that I think it's interesting to explore also is about this is maybe for lecture. Critical ethnography of life in the postmodern neoliberal university. For lecture who are now facing in Indonesia, we call it PTNBH, which is more like private kind of management kind of managing university, which is, in my point of view, it's quite not quite, maybe based on neoliberal ideas. For the people who is engaged in thinking that state university should be public, not managed in like a private way of management, that can be very not only tiring, but it feels like maybe we should not be here. So there is so many maybe many lecturers who find themselves not in the right place in university, not because they don't like the work itself, but maybe the environment of the more neoliberal university not fit into their idea about how the university should be, especially university in state university. For example, that is now happens in Indonesia. And the other ideas that I think need to we can explore is for our students like this one, a story and a stereotype about race, class, and gender, for example. And I earlier mentioned that some students from Timor-Leste, are they learning in Indonesia, Yuli, in our university? I think, yeah, because Timor-Leste and Indonesia has a specific history before, and that very conflicting history. I think exploring how students who study in Indonesia while they are having a Timor-Leste citizenship and a very different culture, which is once upon a time very conflicting. I think this also very interesting to explore how their experience here in our university. Also, for example, this kind of research Couch in Code, Arab American Identity, Image, and Lived Reality, and for Indonesia, maybe not Arab identity, or maybe an Arab identity, or maybe Chinese identity, or maybe Indian identity, which is couched in the code. Like, for example, I study in Malang, for example. In Malang, Chinese and Arabs very much look like in their cultures, like Japanese. So if you not face to face to them to talk to them, for example, they talk in your background, they don't know how they look like, you might think they are Japanese, which is actually they are not. They have like Arabs looks or Chinese looks, which is maybe we think they are not Japanese. I mean, sometimes, and not sometimes, we oftenly caught in the code what people think about us. That's very much different what we think, what we live ourselves as a certain identity. And the last one is the thing that is interesting to study and to explore is also this one. For example, autoethnography in first generation college student status. I think it is also important because it's surprising for me that some of my students is a first generation university students, and they who are not coming from if you cannot see the people who is in the university before, so it seems like you don't have many talk with your big family about what it feels like being university students. And I think these kind of things are also interesting to explore, or what happens and why, and what factors and what kind of barriers or support that you have if you are first generations university students status, especially maybe in certain department which very much different with your background. For example, my husband lecture in literature, for example, and his first generation university students have a difficulty in understanding why literature is very important for them. Why is reading novel, understanding novel, for example, is important for our society? Why making poems is important for our society, while they family maybe have struggling in making money for their daily life, for example, like that. I think that is the some things that we can explore in autoethnographic analysis and research. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Susie. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Particularly those practical contexts for using autoethnography as a tool of inquiry and representation.
Okay, thank you so much. So hopefully it is clear for Melanie and also for Bu Yuyun and then also for all the participants. And then I would like to, we are already at the end of our session, and then I would like to share for the next meeting that we will invite Prof. Jack Whitehead, and then we will share all the information as well for the next session on the 16th of this September. And then if you have time to have a look the website that he has on the Action Research, because he is one of the founder of the Action Research on the living educational theory, that he has been mentioned about action research, narrative inquiry, self-study, participatory research, autoethnography, ethnography, grounded theory, critical theory, and case study. And then we will have the others ideas regarding how to do the transformative education research. So we will share all the information for the next meeting, and then and don't forget to complete it the link, because that's why we conduct several seminars, because we would like to know who really would like to join us for doing this kind of research, and also the community of transformative education practice in Indonesia, and then also in the other parts of the world. Okay, Peter, do you want to close the things? I mean, to say something to all the participants?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Yuli. What a very rich and varied conversation we've had today. We're ranging across a whole bunch of different contexts. This is one of the great strengths of this type of research or inquiry, as we can call it, that we can bring the world to bear on our concerns about education and the future of society. I think one of the big things about education, when I was a teacher at high school, I didn't give much thought to why am I teaching what I'm teaching here in this classroom, in this curriculum? What are the consequences for the world outside of school? That'd probably be a classic mathematics teacher's worldview. The worldview is that of the curriculum in the classroom. But we can no longer afford to live like that and to work like that. Given the global crises that we have, the environmental and cultural crises, I think we should understand and work on developing firstly, our moral agency. That is a sense of, I should be doing something here to make the world a better place. And secondly, the practical agency, I am doing something. One of the great things that we can do as teachers is to observe this cascade effect. You're a teacher, you've got a class of students, and if they become teachers, they become their students and their students and their students. So it's like a cascade, like a waterfall. And that is a fantastic example of moral and practical agency that we can bring into our own teaching practice. So that's one of the aspects, or two of the aspects, of transformative learning theory. So I'm just very, very happy to see that TERG Indonesia is up and running and reaching out and embracing a broader community across Indonesia. And as we've seen today, with people coming from other countries as well. And the same thing is happening in TERG in Nepal. So we've got these, what we call germination centers that are planting seeds and growing and nurturing. And if you're new to this, it might be difficult to appreciate the value of it, but as you get more and more involved, and particularly at a personal level, you come to understand that this form of personal and social growth is unparalleled. And we're so fortunate for all the work that's gone on in the 20th century to bring us up to this point now, that we can build on that and exploit it and expand it. So my thanks go to, firstly, Alin for chairing. Secondly, to the great co-organizers of this conference who are appearing before me in front of me here, Yuli, Mangara, Susie, and Nanny, thank you. And good luck with the ongoing the workshops and the coaching of the papers. And I look forward I look forward to seeing new people getting involved and taking advantage of the benefits that can accrue from an active participation. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So I give the floor to Aline to close the session. Thank you. Thank you,
Yes, all
everyone.
right. Yeah, thank you, Professor Peter Charles Taylor, for lending us your time to share your insight and knowledge about the transformative education research to us. And also to Professor Yuli Rahmawati, PhD, Ibu Neni Mariana, PhD, Bapak Mangarasi Mancorang, PhD, and Dr. Susi Fitri, MSc Cons, for adding valuable experience sharing. So before we end up our workshop today, I would like to ask all the participants to fill out the attendance form on the link provided on the chat box. And thank you for some of you who already fill it. And by the way, somebody said she or he interested to join the TERG Indonesia too. And so to capture our moment today, I kindly ask you to turn on your camera to have a photo session and using our virtual background provided. So please be ready because I will do the screenshot in a while. Yes, so we have 3 pages. Okay, the first page, 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, the second page, 1, 2, 3. Okay, the last one. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, thank you, everyone. And that is a wrap. And thank you for staying with us throughout the 2 hours, 2 and 17 minutes of our workshop. And some of the participants, by the way, asked me whether I can share the recording or not. And I will do share with you, and I will upload it too in the TERG Indonesia YouTube channel. So you can see here. Wait.
And also later on, probably for the example of the papers, like the journal publication, and so we will put on the drive link, and then we will share to all the participants as well.
Yes. So here is our TERG Indonesia YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe because I will do update our recording in here. Okay. Yeah, we already have 2 videos uploaded about the orthography also, so you can check it out and have another knowledge. And I hope that you have gained a lot of insight from our today's workshop, from our wonderful speaker, and see you on the next workshop agenda on the September 16, 2023 with Professor Jack Whitehead about the living theory. So thank you, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you,
Terima kasih.
everyone.
Terima kasih, everyone.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Aline, you can end the meeting.
All right.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
information.